Okay, I'm pleased to introduce Helen Dennis, who's a nationally recognized leader on issues of aging and the new retirement. She is a syndicated columnist on successful aging for the Southern California News Group and is co-author of a Los Angeles Times bestseller, Project Renewment, the first retirement model for career women. Helen, we welcome you very much, and we are recording this for a later broadcast or for people who weren't able to attend. Thank you, Helen, for joining us. And you're
cut out the first 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Joel. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to this session this morning on game changers in aging. I clearly would prefer to be with all of you face to face, but Zoom is now becoming our second best, and in a sense, maybe a savior to make sure that we stay connected. So let me just check, Joel, if everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, everything clear, great. So I'd like to talk about the topic game changers in aging. Okay, and I want to talk about 4 areas, and they are changing today. I can't guarantee what the changes are tomorrow. As you can see, the squiggly line that says the next 4 miles. We don't know what tomorrow brings, but I can tell you a little bit about what's happening today. And the 4 areas I want to talk about are the changes in retirement, how aging is business, what we know about technology and aging, and certainly the community. But before I talk about that, I want to give a little bit of background, just a few figures about life expectancy and those over 65. We know in the 1900 life expectancy of birth was 47. Now, 100 years later, we have gained 30 years of life expectancy. That is considered transformational, absolutely transformational. Let's take a look at the population 65 and over. We look at now 2020, we have about 16% of our population is 65 and over. That means about 1 in 7. What the demographers are very interested in is 2030. Now 2030 is when the youngest of the baby boomers turns 65. This is considered of great interest. And if any of you have been to Florida, I mean, let's look at 2030 means about 1 out of 5 people will be 65 and over. And if any of you have ever been to Florida, you may see some indicators of an older society. You may see smaller portions at the supermarket. You may see more retirement residences, more banks, more hospitals, more recreational centers. If you can imagine in 2030, not every town, but the country in a sense will be like Florida. Not every town, but there will be indicators that this is an older society. So let's start with the first one, retirement. Retirement has lots of definitions. Traditionally, it has been a period of leisure. I would suggest sitting on that chair for 30 years may not be so comfortable, but it may be pretty good for the first few months. It might even get a little boring after time, but certainly leisure, propping your feet up, taking it easy can be part of retirement. Money is part of retirement, no question about it. It is the keystone. If you don't have enough money, you can't retire. But I want to suggest there's more to retirement than the economic aspect. But the economic aspect is absolutely fundamental. And then there's a time to do what you love to do when you want to do it, whether it is gardening or looking at a sunset, it's travel, taking a class, it might be even working. And we know now about 1 out of 4 people, about 20%, 1 out of 5 people today who are over 65 are in the workplace. And it's anticipated in the next 10 years, it'll probably be 1 out of 3. So the labor force is aging and more people who are older are certainly entering the labor force. But something new is happening in how we talk about retirement. It can be referred to as a new life stage. And Mary Catherine Bateson is a cultural anthropologist, and she said it well. She said, what we've done is we've added 20 years, not to the end of life, but to the middle of life. And that middle life is new. There are new aspirations, new dreams, new expectations, new achievements. And so this life stage, and let me add, no question, we added chronological years to the end of life. But now we're talking about a different space, if you will, towards that middle of life, maybe between ages 60 and 85. That is really a new time. So it's so new that your gerontologist, your sociologist, your psychologist can't agree on what to call it. So now our friends in France call it the third age, la troisième âge. Eric Erickson talked about generativity. My colleague Mark Friedman says these are the encore years. Laura Carstensen, who heads up the Stanford Longevity Center, she calls it Act 4. I have colleagues at Boston College that say, this is so new, we're calling it the X Revolution. Ken Dykewald, who heads up something called Age Wave, he says, it's a little like adolescence pushed forward. It's an awkward time, you don't know exactly where you fit, it's called midolescence. Abigail Trafford, who used to work for the Washington Post, calls it the bonus years, and a colleague and I made up a term. We called it renewment, which is a cross between retirement and renewal. So this new period of time has generated some interesting nonprofits. So one is encore.org. And again, this is now this kind of new formation of what's happening in this period called retirement. So encore.org is a think tank in Northern California. They have many components to encore.org. One of it is an encore career. So what is an encore career? An encore career is one that embraces purpose and passion, a paycheck, and actually, most importantly, it's giving back. It's actually second acts for the greater good. One of the things encore.org has done for the past 10 years is it offered something called a Purpose Prize. Purpose Prize, now let me add, encore.org has managed and administered this for 10 years. Now AARP has taken it over. A sip of tea. I could say that if I were facing all of you right now, I would say, now is everybody with me? And you would say, nod your head, or you would say no. So I'm going to assume that still everybody is with me. So encore.org has given out something called a Purpose Prize. It's given to an individual 60 and over who has made a profound impact on society. These are people who have a passion to create change for the better, for the good. And they get money for it. Catalino Tapia won $100,000 for a Purpose Prize. And let me tell you his story. He comes from Mexico at the age of 19 with $6 in his pocket. Moves to San Francisco and he starts a gardening business. He sends his son to law school at Cal. And during the graduation ceremony, he says, why can't other Latino low-income families provide a good education for their kids? So he starts his foundation. He goes to his gardeners. He said, you ask your customers for some money, you contribute. In a period of 2 years, he raises $250,000. He funds 17 student scholarships who in turn do community service. So Catalina Tapia was a Purpose Prize winner. And this is just one small example. And it's a recognition and an affirmation that older adults make a significant contribution to society. We may all know that, but society needs to be remembered. And all of these winners got lots of press in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and it elevated the whole notion of older adults contributing to society and being rewarded for it. There's another component of the Encore organization. There's a network of about 130 organizations and individuals who subscribe to what they call the Encore work, which is really the belief and knowledge that people over 50 are highly valued, are a really source of talent, and are probably the most underutilized natural resource that we have, and Encore wants to make a difference in that. Encore also has something called Encore Universities. There's one. Now, they didn't start as an Encore entity, but in retrospect, this is what they are. Stanford has the Distinguished Career Institute, Harvard has the Leadership Institute, University of Minnesota, University of Connecticut, and the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York has a course called Encore Careers, led by Ruth Wooden. Ruth Wooden had a very successful career in advertising, and she went on to her Encore career and is teaching this course. Another component is they have fellowships. This is where individuals from the corporate sector, the private sector, move into a nonprofit that has high social impact, and with it, they take their corporate skills, apply it to that nonprofit. It's paid, they get about $25,000 for 6 months. The money has to be raised, but again, it's a way of tapping mature talent for the better good. And the last one I want to just address is a relatively new component of Encore. It's called Gen to Gen. It has a very ambitious agenda, mobilize 1 million adults over 50 to help young people thrive and unite all ages, create a better world. They generally connect to organizations, existing organizations that are intergenerational, such as the Big Brothers and Big Sisters. So let's go to the second component. Aging is big business. We older consumers have the discretionary income, hopefully still there during this crisis. We have the discretionary income more than the younger generation, but it's taken business a while to wake up to this fact, but they slowly are doing it. And let me give you a few examples. Grandparents. We have about 70 million grandparents in our country. They are a $179 billion market. And according to an AARP study, we spend, being a grandparent, about on average $2,500 a year on grandchildren. And three quarters of us spend money on this grandchild before the grandchild is born. So we're very exuberant grandparents. So hair products, particularly for men, Rogaine, is a big industry. Rogaine and similar products is a $1.2 billion industry. So this is a before, and if you're lucky, this might be an after, being quite optimistic. Eyeglasses, huge industry. There's a reason there's a lens crafter on every corner. We know that after the age of 40, it is normal to have visual changes in the eye. That's called normal aging. And most people after 40 have some glasses, at least readers. This is a $23 billion industry. And then there's the anti-aging products, which are only growing. That is a $20 billion industry. So aging is big business. The key is for businesses to approach the older population in a way that's more realistic, that's not patronizing, because older adults will buy if you approach us in a way that's rational. Let's go to the next one. There's a belief that older adults aren't tech savvy. Well, all of you who are tuned in, you're tuned into Zoom, you are tech savvy. Most of us have internet, most of us have email and Skype, and many other platforms. So here are two older women, typical conversation. It's a typical day. I Skyped the grandkids, Twittered a new recipe, and Facebooked my daughter. So technology is, of course, a business. It is a $20 to $30 billion business today and only growing. And the components are very vast, from games and computers and smartphones and disease management, fall detection, etc. A growing industry. I want to give you a few examples of advances in technology which make life better for older adults. This is called the Liftware spoon, and you'll see a little gadget on the end. It's for people who have a tremor, either from Parkinson's or essential tremor. And what that little gadget on the end of the spoon does, it stabilizes the spoon. It prevents the tremor. And it is programmed, and it has the chips that can determine the difference between the motion of having your spoon go from your plate to your mouth and the difference between a tremor. The little gadget can attached to a fork. It comes in a set. I think it's under $200. Now, when you think about what does this do with someone who has a tremor, they can go out to lunch with a friend without being embarrassed. They can eat with confidence. It preserves their dignity. So this is a great gadget, and it works and isn't overpriced. Here is another example. This is to protect individuals who have mild cognitive impairment, and it protects them from fraud and financial schemes. It is a prepaid debit card. It's accepted wherever Visa is accepted, and it can be programmed to limit the amount a person charges on that Visa. It can be programmed to limit the amount a person can withdraw from a ATM machine. And again, it allows a person with mild cognitive impairment to operate normally, safely in an environment as a consumer, again, preserving dignity and independence. So this is a relative new one, which is quite interesting. It's a robotic dog. It's called Tombot. And it was designed initially for the founder's mother, who is Tom Stevens, comes out of the computer science industry, retired and moved on to his next career. His mother had dementia. He developed this, I think, in response to her needs. So it's emotional support. Emotional support for this animal that mimics a puppy who is perhaps maybe a golden retriever. It is quite amazing. It responds to its name. It barks appropriately. It goes to sleep when it's dark. It wakes up when it's light. And I encountered this at a tech exhibit, and I put my hand under the dog's chin, and it nestled its head into my chin, okay? And I thought, well, you know, when you look at an animal in the eyes, and particularly a dog, you can make contact. I said, all right, let me look at this dog's eyes. And I'm telling you, I thought the dog was looking at me. So this is being used by families, and it's being used in retirement residences. And it's really done to emulate a puppy in its appearance and behavior. So this is called Tombot, relatively new on the market. You may be acquainted with GoGo Grandparent. You may have used it. GoGo Grandparent is for people who do not have a smartphone. What you do is you call a phone number, you get connected to an operator. The operator then connects you to Lyft or Uber, and a vehicle is sent to your home. The vehicle typically is larger, could accommodate some a wheelchair, some a walker, but you have to be able to transfer yourself independently from the sidewalk into the car. Typically, the driver takes a little longer time, and it's all debit. There is no money exchange. GoGo Grandparent is now in 50 states and in Canada, but I want to give you the backstory. The backstory is quite interesting. The founder is Justin Bugard, and I met him at a conference. His story is the following. He was involved in a startup in Silicon Valley, and it failed. So he had to go back home, and his home is in Torrance, which is next to where I live, which is Redondo Beach. And he goes to live with Grandma Betty for a couple of years because Justin has no money. So one day, Grandma Betty sees Justin using his smartphone to call Uber. And Grandma Betty says, oh, Justin, give me the phone number. Well, clearly there is no phone number. So Justin gives Grandma Betty his cell phone. Well, Grandma Betty is thrilled. She now has his phone number. She's so thrilled. She tells women at her garden club, at her book group, at her theater group. She tells all of these people, you call this number, you get a ride. P.S. Justin is getting phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock at night. He's overwhelmed, and he said, I think there's a business here. That's the business of GoGo Grandparent. Of course, now it is large, very successful. And I said, so why did you do this? And he said, well, one was he saw the need. He said, you know, I'm like any good grandson. I helped my grandmother with technology. Thought that was a great answer. So that's a backstory on Go-Go Grandparent. So this is called Stitch. Stitch can be called a dating site. They like to think of themselves more as a companion site. And there are a number of unique things about Stitch. One is you can determine what kind of relationship you're looking for. It could be romance, it could be companionship, it could be a hiking buddy, it could be someone to have dinner with. That's one unique aspect. The other is they go through a vetting process to make sure you are who you are. There's a lot of scamming going on in these websites, particularly among older adults. The other unique thing is that they tend to match more on interest than age, which is great because if any of you have been on a dating site, everybody says they're 10 years younger than they are. It's always a surprise when they come in person, don't look like anything from their picture. So age is not as significant. And the other unique thing is they get together. They actually have meetups. This is their most recent graphic on their website where you can decide what is it that you're looking for. This is, again, this has now become global, and it did start in Australia. And this is their first married couple. So marriage does result. It's not always, but this is the first married couple from Stitch. The fourth area I want to talk about is community. I think community today is more important than ever. And there are actually two communities I want to talk about. One is very large, the other is extremely small. I want to talk about the village movement, and you may be acquainted with it. I don't know about you, but I know I would like to age in place. An AARP study said 90% of people in their study said they would like to age as long as possible in their own homes, their condos, their apartments. So given that, we have the emergence of the village. This started in 1999 in an affluent area of Boston called Beacon Hill. A lot of 3-story buildings, a lot of academics who retired. They didn't want to move. And they said, how can we organize ourselves so we can help each other stay in our own homes in an organized kind of way? So they created a nonprofit, and the village movement has emanated from that nonprofit model. So what is it? Let me tell you what it's not. It's not a building. It's not a site. It's not a real estate development. It is a community in a geographic area. It is a nonprofit membership organization that essentially has two purposes. One, to enhance and enable people to stay in their own homes as long as possible. And the second part, which is equally important, is to stay connected to their community. We know that social isolation is a national epidemic. And we know social isolation has profound health implications that is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So community is extremely important. There are a number of things, there are a number of roles that a member of the village can take. One is you can contribute services. It's not mandatory, but you also can receive services. So what are the kinds of services? Certainly in the Los Angeles area, transportation is a big one, but there are others. It could be fixing a garden hose. It could be a visit to a sick friend or a lonely person. It could be something as simple as changing a light bulb. And here's a short story. Pasadena has a very robust village, and they produced a video. Part of that video shows a retired engineer who goes to the home of a 97-year-old woman to do something quite simple, to change a light bulb. He goes in, friendly face, greets the person, changes the light bulb, exits the door, and as he's exiting, the woman is looking at him with tears in her eyes to say thank you. We may think changing a light bulb is nothing, but if you can't do it and you're in a dark room and there is a kind, gracious person who's happy to see you and changes it for you, the woman was moved to tears. And the engineer, it was a discreet, simple volunteer piece. So, excuse me, those are some of the services, and they're meaningful to the recipient and so also meaningful to the volunteer. There are about 300 villages in the country. 200 are functional, about 100 are in the development process. Here in California, we have 60. We have 60 villages. Excuse me 1 minute, I will be right back. Okay, all right, I am back. I want to talk to you about, well, let me talk to you a little bit more about the village in general. So it's not a place to live, it's actually a way to live. There are men's groups, educational programs, hiking groups, birthday celebrations, and there's one village I want to talk to you about a little bit more. You may be acquainted with High Village, LA. High Village, LA is a partnership between Temple Emmanuel and Temple Isaiah. The two of them came together to enhance existing synagogue functions. And they have a very robust program. This is Walking with the Rabbi, and you may recognize Rabbi Laura Geller on the far right. She and her late husband, Richard Siegel, are co-founders of High Village LA, and I was honored to work with them early on in some of the development phases. They have community celebrations, intergenerational programs, and it is, it's working extremely well. I should add that to launch this, they received a $250,000 grant from the Jewish Community Foundation, which launched them well. So I want to talk about one other community. This is on a much smaller scale. This is one that my colleague and I founded. It's Renewment. It started out as Project Renewment. And these are 6 of the 8 founders. So what is Project? Well, let me first give you a backstory. The backstory to this is I got a call in 1999 from the woman in Burgundy, Bernice Bratter, who at the time was the executive director of the Women's Foundation. Very successful, and calls me and says, this is 1999, Helen, she said, is there anything done, any model programs, any research that talks about career women who have felt passionate about their work, identify themselves with their work, and move to retirement? Because she says, to be honest with you, I'm having a hard time. So I said, Bernice, I don't even think we're on the radar. And she said, well, Helen, let's have lunch to see if there's something to talk about. We had a 4-hour lunch. And she said, well, why don't you invite some like-minded people? I'll do the same. We'll see if there's something here. Well, there was. We had a 4-hour dinner. And we have proceeded to meet actually for the next 20 years, about once a month. So what is Project Renewment or Renewment? It's actually a forum for career women 55 and older. And it's to really use the skills, the talents, the vision, the energy, creativity, and move that to the next chapter to forge new directions. And this is the key, that is equal to, if not more satisfying than their previous years. So what happens with Renewment? People meet in individuals' homes, usually over dinner, usually break bread together, and they talk about a topic that deals with transition and change on all levels. It's very democratic. Everybody has a voice, and they continue a conversation. It is a forum. So and I should say, this has grown. We had no intention of expanding, but other people on the West Side found about this group of women who were talking about issues of retirement and change and transition. They said, can you join the group? It's hard to join a group in the middle. We said, what? We'll help you start a group. Well, now, it's not 20 years, we have 40 groups across the country of Renewment women who are talking about transition and change. But it had struck us, why, and this has grown virally, it's not been marketed, it's word of mouth. So why did this catch on? For a number of reasons. There are more career women retiring. We, and this is now of the silent generation, the youngest of the silent generation, they're the first to live before and after the women's movement. We knew what it was like to be a traditional homemaker, a community volunteer, a good wife, and then many went back to school and established a career. So we knew what the traditional role was and the less traditional role. We're also the first and largest generation of women to define ourselves by our work. But here is the key: no role models. Who are the role? There are many male role models. A lot of them are financially based, but who are the role models for women? We could have Madeleine Albright. We could have Mary Kay. They're not two women that we easily identify with, but there were no role models. So we had to actually invent our own. I want to share this picture with you. We started a group in Paris. It's no longer meeting, but this was the original group for fabulous women. I'll tell you a little story about this. I addressed the women in my best French for about 3 minutes. Unfortunately, they understood English. And I gave them a list of topics we could talk about. We could have a renewment meeting. And there were 7 topics. And the 7th topic was sexuality. Would you like to guess which one they chose? They chose sexuality. And I said, ladies, this is a difference between Parisian women and maybe those in Southern California. It took us 5 years to address that topic, and you got it off the bat. Anyhow, they were fabulous women, and we had a great time together. So you can say, okay, the men, are they chopped liver? You mean they don't have concerns? I've worked with about 20,000 employees in an educational setting on the non-economic aspects of retirement. And my observation is that men talk about this differently. Okay, now this is going to be a sexist comment, okay? My experience is that not only do men talk about this differently, they don't talk about it. They may talk about politics and economics and global affairs, but until you get to the issues, if they get to it, it may be a long time. Women have a very different style. They seem to get to the it very quickly. Again, it's somewhat sexist, and there are exceptions to all of this. So this is Ron Drescher and Brian Harris. These are 2 newly retired, very senior advertising executives. The 2 of them are riding on the bike path along Redondo Beach. They love their work, and they say to each other, oh my God, what are we going to do with ourselves now for the next 20 or 30 years? So they started something called the Life Transition Group. It's about 25 men, successful, mostly businessmen, some attorneys, a few engineers. They meet once a month. They are very, very organized, far more organized than Renewment Women. They know what they're doing every month. They have a program, the nice thing is that once a year, we women get invited to join them. We meet in a corporate boardroom with 16 seats around a large table, 8 for the women, 8 for the men. And we have a discussion. We have a discussion on transition and change that's relevant to our lives. We've talked about who are the most influential people in our lives. We talk about the role of friendship, the role of role models. And what I always listen for is, are there really gender differences? I mean, do men and women, are they really that different when you get to this life stage and you have a similar professional background? My observation was they're not that different when you finally get down to the serious issues. But the one difference which the men identified, because they said, women, how do you do this? You seem to have all of these friends. You seem to make these relationships and sustain them so easily. You never seem to be alone. So I think one difference is how women establish and create relationships, perhaps with greater ease. So that is, and I should say, it's a love fest. They think we're fabulous, and we think they're absolutely terrific. So it's really a very inspiring and wonderful group. So you can say, well, what have you talked about in these renewment sessions? we talk about retirement and the decision. How do you make the decision when it's right? Certainly money is part of it, but are there some signals? Has your cubicle been moved to the restroom? Are you no longer invited to the retreats? Or are you just saying, I'm tired of the commute and I can't undergo another management change? So what are the signals that now is the time? So in my earlier, I'm going to go back. In the earlier email that I sent, I had many more illustrations, but I want to just identify other things that we've talked about. Productivity. What does it mean in this life stage? Well, when you're working, there's some external criteria. You get rewarded externally. And what our women found is productivity was really self-defined. It was, am I taking care of myself? I feel productive. Am I caring for an aging parent? That makes me feel productive. Am I volunteering? That means productive. So our women found that they were defining productivity internally as opposed to externally. Another topic we talk about was, what if he retires first? Well, this could be a time for a good discussion. The research indicates that the best chance of a pretty easy relationship retirement is they both retire together. The next best is if she retires first. The more difficult can be if he retires first. She may come home and say, honey, the dishes are still in the dishwasher. The laundry isn't folded. The fridge it's empty. What have you been doing all day? So the roles, some of you may be chuckling that this may sound like a familiar conversation. It is very familiar, but it requires some conversation, which is another issue because these topics typically are not talked about before retirement. And those conversations are really useful during retirement. So I think those are some of the topics. We talk about fitness, we talk about wisdom, we talk about who will be there for me, okay? And sometimes it's not always your children. Sometimes we talk about guilt. So they're topics about transition and change. So what have we learned from this experience? The women report that they are more introspective, they test new ideas, but there are two pieces that I think are most important. Inadvertently, we have created small, enduring communities of women. And now community is more important than ever. And people have made new best friends. That was not the intention, but they've made new best friends. And this was the light bulb. I can say this occurred to me. I gave a presentation at a conference international conference in Toronto, that this is now not only a transition from work to retirement, but because we've been in this for 20 years, we have built a platform for women to support them through transition and change throughout a lifetime. So it continues. And certainly I'm available if any of you want more information on it. So all of this has morphed into something. It morphed into a book. We took notes for the first 5 years. And then we got some press in the LA Times, in Time Magazine Online. And the CEO of Scribner, which is a sub of Simon & Schuster, read the piece, found the journalist, and they called us. They said, we'd like you to write a book. We said, oh, we can do that. 18 months later, we gave him a manuscript, and we were very shocked and delighted that we made the LA Times bestseller list. There are 38 essays in the book, and at the very end, it's if you want to create a renewment group, here's how you do it, here are the questions, here are your former group. So that is an example of a small community, okay? The village is a much larger undertaking, but this is a small community that has endured because of the need for community. So we have game changers in aging that are changing the aging experience. So the question is, what is this going to look like when we come out of this period of time? I'm going to share some best guesses. Because what I've reported to you is what's on the ground. This is happening now, okay? Now, actually, it's quiet, but it's happening now. I think we're going to see changes in retirement. There are going to be more individuals who need to work for the money or the fear factor. You may have enough money, but what if this should happen again? Fear is a great motivator. So we may have people who are working longer, taking retirement later. We also may have people who say it's enough. I'm going to take retirement now and taking early retirement. Business, there will be more business opportunities with older adults just because the need is there, certainly in the healthcare business. And technology is going to continue to explode. Just look at what happened to Zoom. And I think community is going to expand, the need for it. I mean, one of my observations with the Zoom technology, I am in touch with more people than before. I started a Sunday morning coffee with all the women in my family, women who really had not met other women in the family. So I think this appreciation and the need for community will actually only increase. Yeah, so after this pandemic, it's going to be a squiggly road. No one really knows when or how. But I'm going to be very optimistic. I like to close with the great philosopher Charles Schulz that life is a 10-speed bicycle. Most of us have gears we never use. And I think these gears are part of maturity. I think we are a generation of survivors. I think we have resilience, we have grit, we have wisdom, we have compassion, we have insight, and I think we're survivors. So if we've not used these skills will be needed and will be used now. And I am an optimist that we of the mature generation will endure and will have continued opportunities to thrive. So that is my piece on game changers in aging. And so I think, Joel, that we have some time for questions or comments.
Yes, we do. Helen, can you end the share screen?
I'm happy to end the share screen. And
There we go.
Here's everyone. It's great to
Yes.
see you. I love seeing the, I have to say it's a very strange sensation if you're used to doing presentations and talks with people where you can see their faces. For example, I usually start with a story. Well, if you don't know if people are responding to your story, you're just hanging on a cliff. It's very, very different talking to a screen and not seeing your faces. So I'm happy to see all your beautiful faces this morning.
Well, here are our faces. So I'm sure some of you may have some questions or comments. If you can mute yourself or indicate on the chat if you have a question, I can call on you. Does anybody have a comment or question for Helen?
Interesting.
So,
You have a comment? You have a comment?
Helen Dosick, are you still on? Are you here somewhere?
I have a comment.
we
I'm here. Hi, Joel.
Yes. So first of all, who had? Let's see, S. Lane.
Yeah, hi, Sheila Lane.
Go ahead, Sheila.
In the valley, Adat Ariel and Temple Beth Hillel have joined up to try to start a Chai Village kind of program. And they did have a couple of organizational meetings. It hasn't gotten off the ground yet, but it is something that they're trying to start, modeled after the one that was described.
So
Right.
if I can just comment on that, I think that Rabbi Geller is doing some consulting in helping synagogues approach this. And let me add, I was president of my synagogue for 4 years. So I'm somewhat acquainted with synagogue life. To me, this is such a natural because it's a built-in community and it adds a dimension to the function of a synagogue. So I think it's an absolute natural. And the High Village LA has one prerequisite. You have to belong to either temple. The fees are very much reduced. I think it's like $100, where the fees on the more traditional village is for a single person is about $675, and for a household is $995, which I still think is the biggest bargain in town if it's an alternative to assisted living.
Helen Dusick,
Yes, I'm here.
do you have any comments or questions, and maybe in light?
No, of course, a number of things that Helen Dennis spoke about, I'm familiar with, but I love this renewment. I'm going to look it up. I think it's a fantastic program because I was caught in the same situation after I retired. I really didn't know what to do with myself. And I wish I had access to organizations such as this with other professional women. So
if I can, Joel, respond to that. Helen, the other Helen.
yes.
I am available to be helpful if you want to launch a group.
That would be great. I really would like to do that.
So what is so extraordinary to me is that they endure. I mean, they stay together over the years. They mature together. They age together. So if I can be helpful, and a synagogue can also be a base to start this. You can have a VBS. I started one with my synagogue at Congregation Near to Me. We have a women. So
the only thing I want to add, which is totally irrelevant to the discussion, is that Mary Bateson is Margaret Mead's daughter.
That's right. And that's an important addition. That's an important addition. Thank you, Helen.
Joel, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Are you calling on me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, can you hear me? Because I'm not lit up on the screen. I just wanted to say that, to add something to your model, and that is two different books and concepts. One of them is Viktor Frankl's book, In Search of Meaning. I think that search continues throughout our lives, and the meaning changes. I think at the top of the list is always health. The assumption is that we're healthy enough to move forward, so I'm going to assume that. But the other one is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If people don't have money, if they don't have resources, if that is a problem, then they have difficulty moving forward with. Can you hear me, Joel?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think those are two extremely important variables. I retired at 55, which is very young, because I had mastered my career and I wanted to do something else. And the things I wanted to do was, number one, volunteer, because I'd never done that. I'd always been in school, had kids and my husband and all of that. And the second thing was I wanted to have hobbies, because I don't come from a family of hobbyists. I come from a family of women professionals. And I want you to know that having defined in my mind what those goals are going to be made a huge difference. I'm not really a joiner. I don't really belong to women's groups. It's not that I have a problem with it. It's just that I just haven't. And I just want to share with you that in my observation of men and how they do after they retire is they're missing the In Search of Meaning, the new redefinition of what meaning is in their lives. And the other is where they are on that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think extremely important considerations. And I'm sure you cover that in your discussion. But I just want to tell you, I ended up with a new career. I became a mediator for the securities industry and also in the courts, and an arbitrator for the securities industry. Completely different career. My PhD is in public health, had nothing to do with that. And I just think it's really important. And I can say that Sheila Lane is another example of somebody who raised two fabulous children. And she became a professor at UCLA. Sheila, in your 50s, is that right? Or in your 40s? Were you in your 50s? So I think it's very important that Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the issue of In Search of Meaning is extremely important, because the things I'm doing have meaning for me. I'm a really good quilter now. I work with glass fusion and I make really beautiful glass fusion pieces. And it's totally different, you know, and I don't sell them because I love them. They're like my family. I could sell them, but I don't do that. So I just wanted to say that with men, it seems like women have less trouble doing this than men do. And I know example of a gentleman who was the head of a department at CSUN. His wife is a wonderful quilter. And he died. He died watching television because he lost focus of, so where do I go from here? What's my new meaning? So anyway, I just wanted to share that personal experience with you.
Yeah, if I can just comment, I think that's a really important point, because one of the characteristics of the aging boomer generation is looking for meaning and purpose. And that is a big driver. And I think women can get to that topic a little faster than men. So yeah, your comment is right on.
Anyone else have a comment or question for Helen? Yes. I'm you. Is that
Lena.
Eileen? Alina, go ahead.
With regard to the renewment groups, do the ladies just get together and talk once a month, or do they do things or have projects or anything of that sort?
So every group is different. It is a forum for discussion. However, they can design it as they want. Our focus is that the discussions enable women to make decisions which are good for themselves and their families. That they, if it is a search for meaning and purpose, that they can find it. So it really depends on the group. That isn't necessarily a function, but it's one that you can design it for yourself. Our idea was that each group should own their own group. It reflect what they want. But the focus is on very effective and meaningful change and transition. And I hope it's okay.
So let me make a couple comments. One is to let everybody know that at Valley Beth Shalom, the Hazak Steering Committee has actually helped commission a positive aging task force, which is looking at how the synagogue can better address all of the issues and needs of our senior population. This goes beyond what our Hazak agenda has been, and that is, very much focused on sort of educational programs, enlightenment, discussion groups, classes, etc. But as Helen has pointed out, there are a lot of other issues and needs that we have and that we could help support as a synagogue beyond and above and beyond Hazak. We have been interviewing, and by the way, Helen Dosick and I are the co-chairs of this Positive Aging Task Force, along with Rabbi Feinstein, and several others on this call are involved with the Positive Aging Task Force. We have been interviewing a number of leaders in aging, from the Jewish home, from academics, from medical experts, and we actually have met with Geller, and Rabbi Geller actually spoke to Hazak this last year, and we're going to be meeting with her again and others from High Village LA to learn more about how they're addressing all of the other community and service needs that many of us in our community may need. So a lot of this work is going on, and Helen, your conversation with us today has just helped reinforce some of the areas that may be worthy of our attention above and beyond what BBS Hazak has been doing already. So I just want to call for, if there's any other last comment or question that you might have for Helen and her with her presentation today. Esther, go ahead, I'll unmute you.
Hi, that was terrific. Really, thank you so, so much. There's something I'd like to point out that could be really important for people, and that's to start earlier than when they're already retired and aging, and continue. And it stitches the two things together, and that is to pick up some kind of hobby or learning that will give you something to do. I've got tons of those. I'm so busy all day from morning till night. And my son in South Africa is 62. He's learning French. Now he's top of his class. So my daughter said, why French? I mean, I said, great, you can join a French speaking group. I want to learn Spanish. We live amongst Spanish people, speaking people. I don't have enough time in the day to do all the things I want to do now. So any hobby that you can learn that can take you into that time, there's so much you can do to learn, and that also keeps your mind from losing it. And
Thank you,
that's my
Esther.
contribution.
Thank you. And with that, Helen, I want, on behalf of our Hazak community here, I want to thank you very, very much. We overcame the technical issues, and I want to thank you very, very much for your presentation. You are very welcome to continue on the call, as our next speaker will be Bill Green on planetary exploration. Let me just tell everybody, we're going to take a short bathroom break. You can take a bathroom break at home, and we will be reconvening at 11:15. So that's in about 11, 12 minutes.
Okay, and Joe, I just
Bill,
want
at that time.
Joe, I just want to thank you for the gracious invitation and to be with these wonderful Hazak members. And I know that your present is great and your future is even going to be greater. So thank you.
Well, thank you again. And again, we're going to just take a short bathroom break, and we'll reconvene in about 10 minutes, 11:15.